You don't even get to watch it like some point.
Can badgers like sleep off and stuff too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, soaking a mongoose sleeps off king cobra venom.
Did it get changed back?
That was fast.
You should make this a daily thing to do. Constantly changing. I'll do it from 6 to 22 days. We should take the idea out of college.
Okay. Why is conservation biology important to mammals? Oh, who cares about that? Put it. Do you know what ecosystem services are? Services. Okay, it's the things that we get from the ecosystem, whether it is just pure innate beauty, interest, resources, whether it be like minerals or food in the case of Carl right there, or whatever. Right. So it fits into some kind of ecosystem service to conserve them. What would that be? How do you benefit from conserving a black-footed ferret? It is biodiversity. Why does that matter? Okay. What happens if you remove a species from the ecosystem it's within? Okay. Is that good, bad, or neutral? Okay, good. If you removed a small carnivore that ate a small but rather populous herbivore, then what happens?
So in the case of Colorado with the bulls and the elk/deer,
Mm-hmm.
it made it so a lot of the grassland and stuff would overgraze.
Yeah. All everything goes down. What happens to subsequent sections of an ecosystem when that happens? Like if a grassland gets overgrazed, so what's the result?
All the secondary, were they tertiary consumers would end up being out-consumed.
Right. Okay, good. Right. And then what happens to, this is one thing that often gets ignored, even at scientific research level. What happens to smaller organisms? Bigger than that. Let's say macroinvertebrates. Yeah, they get outcompeted such that you have severely reduced biodiversity, not just from not from a tertiary consumer, but from a primary consumer as well, in the level of macroinvertebrates, right? Because many macrovertebrates are a primary consumer, right? They're not a producer often, but they're a primary consumer of whatever that thing is. If you get rid of entire insect communities, then everything on top of it falls apart, right? I mean, it's like macroinvertebrates just get ignored because they're in like such a small space and world and stuff. But once you start looking at them more, it's like, oh, they're like the footing to what is everything else for animal life, right? I mean, there's plants on the bottom, right, that hold everything together, right? Without them, we're all dead, right? I mean, we die, they'll be fine. Most plants will be fine, right? Except for pollination things. But other than that, most of them be fine. But suddenly, if they're gone, then all of us are dead in like 2 months, right? Like that's bad. So, okay. for biodiversity reasons, such that it matters. If you take something out, then you have eventual collapse that then starts affecting us later down the line, right? Are we good with how that is inserted in then? Like, you can't just remove things. We've contemplated removing mosquitoes for like the past decade. And there have been some experiments that are done now where you take mosquitoes, make them infertile, and then release the males into the population, right? And that seems to help. But you're not just removing mosquitoes from the ecosystem. That would be largely detrimental, like catastrophic. Right. So you have to ask the question, is that better? Or if you just remove them and save a bunch of human lives, is that better? But then you get into the weeds of what makes human lives better than an animal life? Is it? I always stood on the ground of it's not. Yeah, a lot of people do, but like there's no intrinsic value in my mind that makes my life more valuable than Carl's life. His previous life, wherever his cousin is at. Right. So like I don't really think mine is any more valuable than a dog or a cat or anything. Right. Like it's just. Well, at least it'll be spicy. It'll get some hot sauce. You know, gotta put a little bit of Kahlua on there. Otherwise, what are we doing? Okay. What about the Afrotheria stuff, Tara? What about it? What did you read? Okay. So the whole idea, well, not the whole idea, but one of the main defining features of Afrotheria is that Africa was separated for millions of years, right? And it before it eventually ran into Eurasia, right? Since it was separated for millions of years, you had a bunch of open niches that were available to be exploited. And if you have a bunch of open niches available to be exploited, what's going to happen? Right. You're going to have a ton of different things that are going to exploit open niches that now, when we look at them, look very similar to something else, but it is not that thing. Right. So, for example, one of the best examples in there is Tenorix. So in the Afrotheria slides at the very beginning, we just like mentioned Tenorix. They look like hedgehogs. It's not a hedgehog. It's not even that closely related to a hedgehog at all, whatsoever. It's more closely related to an elephant than it is a hedgehog. But it looks like a hedgehog because there was a niche available to be exploited. Therefore, you have an organism, as Africa is essentially a gigantic island at that time, something developed in order to adapt to fit that space. Same thing is true for an aardvark. You know what an aardvark is? What the primary diet of an aardvark? Termites and ants. But it's not an anteater. Right? Like it is not an anteater of like North America at all, or of South America. Or the giant anteater, not related to it whatsoever. But it fills the space. It kind of looks like an aardvark has got like a bunch of scarce hair down around its abdomen, right, on its legs. But if you take and look at it, it looks like you took a pig, an armadillo, and an anteater and converged all those three and smushed it together. It's got really big, long ears like a pig, a long rostrum like a anteater, the snout of a pig, and then the overall body shape where like the abdomen comes up and is curved like an anteater. That's strange. It's really strange, but it's its own thing that is in there, right? The same thing is true for like the elephant shrew we were talking about. Not a rodent, right? Not a metatherian that fits in there. It's a eutherian. Not really, it's not a shrew either. So it's not a shrew. It's not a rodent. So like, what is it? Right? Yeah, Afrotherian. So the Afrotheria is full of all of these things. You look at this thing, it's from Africa, it's an Afrotherian. What is this? It's its own thing. Because Africa was an island for so many millions of years, you have an open niche for that to exist. What's another example in Afrotheria that I can talk about before we get on it even more? Oh God, what is the otters in Afrotheria called? They're not otters. They're God, what is it? I feel dumb. It's called an otter in Afrotheria. The common name is otter, but it's not actually. Say what? Otter shrew. Yeah. If you look, pull up a picture of an otter shrew. And I'll pull one up.
Yeah, that's something.
That, yeah, right. That's a thing. What is that? That's a thing, is what that is. Lumpy or frumpy? Frumpy? Yeah, like what is that? Otter shrew. Like, what is this thing?
It's a monstrosity.
It is a mammal. What is weird about it? A lot. Yeah. Does that look like a mammal tail at all of like a cetacean? Because cetaceans do what with their tail? It's vertical, right? Reptiles are the ones that go side to side, or fish go side to side, not mammals. Mammals are up and down. Why are mammals up and down? Because that's the way our vertebral column aligns, right? So it's like, why is this that? And then look at its head. That looks like a shrew, right? And it's got the weird cone-shaped thing, and then like its body is like, what's, yeah, just like the whole thing is like, what is going on with this animal? And then it's got like little digit. It's just like T-Rex, look at my strong hand kind of thing, you know? Like, what's going on there? What else did you read about Afrotheria, Sarah?
He was talking about how like or something like wasn't it was just named because it looked like an elephant, not that it was and like
Yeah, so an elephant shrew was named an elephant shrew simply because it looked kind of like a shrew, but then had a long nose that was able to be controlled like an elephant. So it was like, what is this thing? We're just going to essentially, if you're in Britain, cheekily call it an elephant shrew, right? There had to be a massive Windows update because this thing is going at a snail's pace. Technical difficulties.
Wow.
All right. Here on the tree is Aphrotheria in red. Right there. And this talks about a bunch of continental drifting, convergent evolution because of what we had just previously said. Are we good with this monophyletic, paraphyletic clade thing? Okay. Elephant shrew, elephant, the only thing that looks like what it is in the entire clade. This looks like an elephant, it is an elephant. Interestingly enough, for whatever reason I don't understand, they're planning to bring back woolly mammoths in 2027. Is it?
Where are they even gonna put those?
Why?
Should that be like 1 or 2 around?
It seems like Jurassic Park waiting to happen.
Yeah, but
No.
Mix them with so many wild carnivores, like apex predators, and you're good. Just
Yeah? I was wondering when we were going to get to that. It just seems like, why? Just because we can, I guess.
Wasn't that from the movie? Just because it can in the show?
Yeah.
Scientists are too busy figuring out where they
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go blue. Okay. While I'm thinking about it, because I'll forget to mention it any other time. So, woolly mammoths went extinct during the Ice Age, right? Okay. Are you aware that there was a group of woolly mammoths that existed for about 10,000 years after that? There are pygmy woolly mammoths that were about 5 feet tall. They were on an island in northern Russia, north of Siberia. And they just happened to be there. So it's isn't there a woolly mammoth Pokemon or something? Yeah. Yeah, whatever that's called. After Gen 1, I don't know. Yeah, so there was a dwarf mammoth that existed after the Ice Age because they were still far enough up to be able to subsist. But there just weren't as many resources, so they just shrank. Kind of like, what Homo floresiensis is? So when you take organic evolution, you'll talk about Homo Neanderthals, Denisovans, and then you'll probably mention floresiensis at some point. Homo floresiensis was a human species that lived in the Indonesian islands, but that's like a sub thing. But floresiensis was a dwarf human species, and they were about as big as like hobbits are described in Lord of the Rings, which is excellent, I think. Okay, this is what you read, right?
No, I read the one that you can put on.
Okay.
The picture.
Yeah, the external link. Yeah. All right. As we go through Aphrotheria, and I know we only have a few minutes left. Technical difficulties, sorry. I didn't expect it to take 20 minutes to boot up. So good thing Fridays are nice and chill. We're going to look at a bunch of different things and how they are really interesting compared to other animals. Hyraxes, for example, Brooklyn, did you say the Idaho Falls Zoo has hyraxes? What's weird about hyraxes?
Climb.
They climb a lot. There's two other things that are like really weird.
I didn't see them. They were tucked away in a corner with a bunch of birds.
Okay. You ever see their teeth? They have tusks that are made from incisors, not canines. So that's really weird. Most tusks you get come from canines. There's one other animal that has tusks that are made out of incisors. No, those are canines. They're canines. Usually the left canine. What other animal has tusks from incisors? Yeah. Look at that, how closely related there, right? 200 IQ. That's right. All right. Hyraxes have tusks that are made from their incisors, which is interesting. They can climb better than you would think, and they have a plantigrade foot arrangement. We haven't talked about like digigrade and plantigrade that much, but digigrade essentially is that you're walking on your toes. Okay, so you're walking on your tippy toes, and that's what you're putting your weight on. So like the ungulates, for example, have a digigrade foot arrangement, right? We have a plantigrade foot arrangement where you're walking on the soles of your feet mostly. That's not to say that you don't use your toes and bear some weight on it, right? Or vice versa. But it's like the majority of the weight is located here. So a hyrax uses a plantigrade foot arrangement, and so does an elephant, for example. You look at their toes on a hyrax, it looks exactly like the toes, for the most part, on an elephant. They're extremely closely related, even though this is the largest land mammal in existence, and this guy is relatively smallish. They're still very closely related. Then you get Sirenia up here, the sea cows. Those are the Afrotherians that have traversed more of the globe than any other Afrotherian. For what reason? Sea cows. Because they can swim, right? So they were able to get away from the island that it was. Tenorex down here look like a hedgehog. I mean, they look very similar to a hedgehog. Their face is a little bit different, right? But for the most part, it looks like a hedgehog. Not a hedgehog at all, but it looks exactly like a hedgehog almost. Golden moles look very similar to a mole. Is it a mole? It's an Afrotheria, so your best guess should just be not a mole. Yeah, right. It looks like an element, looks like an animal just like was 83% through development and just like, we're good. Right? Like we're mostly there, but not quite. And then we're just done. So that's weird. Like moles, though, like some moles, they don't have eyes, which is strange. Right? You ever seen a picture of it like a star-nosed mole? Yeah, coming out of their face. Their nose is just like, it's like nightmare fuel kind of looking animal almost. Yeah. Elephant shrews we'll talk about. These guys are obviously very strange. And then aardvarks, this is the weird pig anteater armadillo guy. The cartoon that's been going on for 30 years or whatever. Yeah. I think in the books or something, he actually had an elongated nose to begin with, right? Yeah. Yeah, before anybody in here was born, besides me. Who's the oldest person in here besides me? Nick?
I'm 23.
Man.
No, I'm 23. I'm 22. Sorry.
I've almost been out of high school for that long. Oh, God. Yeah. All right. There's two major branches in Afrotheria. One is Pedungulata, and the other one is Afroinsectiphilia. Oh, okay. Well, that's not so bad. All right. When I was 25, I got called 30 because that was my mentality, I guess. I don't know. Think you're what?
I taught a climbing class. They all thought I was 25. My co-instructor was 25. They thought he was 30.
Oh, yeah.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, I was in class. I didn't, because I knew your age. Oh, yeah.
Look at these feet.
Said they needed an adult to check them.
Look at these feet.
Anyway,
Yeah. What does that look like? Well, they look like toes. Toes of what? Obviously, it's a hyrax. What does it look like? It looks like an elephant. It looks like an elephant. It's just got a nice stalk come down. It gets like much wider and projects outward. And then it has these like toenails on the end of it that look like an elephant, right? So Pedungulata means almost ungulate, coming from there. See you later. Guy walks out, doesn't even say bye.
yeah, crazy.
I'll be the same.
It's got the Irish goodbye going on here.
You said this class.
Yeah, well, it'll be a formality when he takes the midterm and be like, oh, crap.
You should make it like a- You should fail.
Yeah.
Option B, midterm. An essay question worth 50%. Describe to me how sea cows are related to elephants, but not.
I mean, you got a glimpse of it. I feel once again.
That would be incredible to do.
Can you give us a hint on what would be on the essay?
Well, you just like give us
Are you
a
basically gonna
question.
be
I read you what was on the exam, essentially.
Oh, I know
What? And
that.
pointed out.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's
When I pulled out the thing, I said, let's go over what might be on the exam. And then you guys were looking at the midterm, and I was like, I'll just pull up the exam. You should know.
Wait. Was that the one time I wasn't?
Yeah,
Wait, last Friday? Two
Yeah.
Fridays ago?
yeah. So one of the Fridays, yeah.
Wow.
Listen, I don't take attendance. It's a 4,000 level class. You can choose to be here or not be here, but that's your own detriment. This, it is totally on you. You're an adult. All right. We'll go, Aphotheria starts our next unit, right? So we'll get into a lot of that, convergent evolution, more of what that means, how these things are different, and so on. And since we didn't spend a whole lot of time on Pesiodactyla, we're going to have the space for more carnivora kind of things and more bats, Megaloptera, and so on. Exam Monday, you'll have from 1 to 5 to do it, 4 hours. You won't need 4 hours, almost for sure. Most people will probably finish in like an hour and 15, hour and 20 at most. There's one essay question, some like not, what's short answer, but like not one sentence. It's like 2 or 3 sentences you would need.
That's still, yeah.
That's still short answer.
Short
Okay.
answer can be anywhere from like 1 to 4.
Yeah. Okay. So short answer. And then some bunch of multiple choice, true, false, all that.
And then there was like something with like
Knowing definitions, you're not going to have to just like write out definition. But if you don't know the definition, some multiple choice questions are going to be bad. Like if you don't know what evolution is or natural selection or sexual selection, it's going to be a bad time.
They're going to be very similar to the
Yeah. I am Dave reincarnated as far as that goes. Except for I'm funnier than Dave.
Agreed.
Maybe it's not. Let's try that last year.
Dave is great. I'm just, I'm funnier than Dave. All right. Any questions before the midterm then? A normal exam would be like 90 questions. But 10 of those could be, or are like, here's a picture of this with all the bones, different bones labeled, and it's like 8 or 10 of them or something, right? And then you just label the bones. Ulna, radius, pelvis, femur.
It's like
Ilium, yeah. So ilium, ischium is your ass. Pubis is the front, right? And ilium, this is your iliac crest right here, is your hips up here.
I remember like last semester I did like the head, shoulders, knees, and toe song. And I would do the bones.
Yeah. So that like the ilium, the iliac crest being your hip, it's women have bigger iliac crest than men do, right? And so you could just use that. You have bigger iliac crest. Yeah, you have bigger iliac crest. Why? To hold a baby, right? For the weight to hold it. Also, it serves as how do a lot of women hold a baby? You can hold it right here and stand here. Watch a man try to do that. Like it doesn't work. And that's why men just like, because men, we can't do that too well. And we're just like, And so you just like hold them like this, right? You just walk around. Yeah. Yeah, right? It's fine. So pretty much like that, Nick. Yeah. There's a whole sheet of true and false, a couple of pages of multiple choice. It's, it's a full exam. But if you've read in here and kept up with what's going on and everything, it's not going to be like this overly bearing thing. It's not going to be an OChem exam. It's also not going to be worded such that, God, how were those multiple choice questions worded? It was like, if A is true, B is not true, and then like C was like, if A and B are true, then I'm, yes, yeah, and that's, First of all, those are a pain in the ass to write.
You gotta figure out if you're right.
Yeah, I did. Like, I got to write the question. Like, what is the answer to the question I just wrote? Dumb.
Which answer is most likely not to be likely to be the wrong answer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which is the most correct?
Right.
Yeah, there's none of that. There are a couple, all of the above,
Yeah.
but that's as complicated as it gets.
You can do it like they did. If you chose one of the things, you get half credit. But if you chose like all the above, it was only one thing. You're not going to get this.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. That's how I describe myself. Pretty much.
So I was like, I just want
I've thought about doing that before
it was so stressful.
on A and P exams, because A and P students don't listen. When you tell someone, like when you're going over the hand, for example, and you're going over phalanges, there's proximal, middle, and distal, and it's numbered 1 through 5. You have to write proximal 5th phalange of the left hand, because this is also phalanges and this is also the fifth phalange. Which one do you mean? And your toes are also phalanges. So like, what? Be specific. And then I just get proximal fifth phalange. No. Nope. Which one?
No. That's like
Right. But yeah, but that's like obviously different. So it like obviously matters. So like, what do you mean? And then I get A&P students whining that, why'd you take off points? Well, obviously it's not the same thing, is it? Right. Anyways. Any other questions? Okay. Good luck on your exam. Sure, it'll be great. The better you do, the quicker it is for me to grade.
Yeah.
The worse you do, the longer it takes for me to grade.
Because there wasn't enough pressure already.
You do better, so I'll just pass.
There's two scenarios while grading. Either it's really good and you can delightfully have some bourbon, or it's really bad and then you have to resort to Disney movies and ice cream. Because if you keep grading it while having bourbon, you start writing things like, no.
Do you ever get really sad when someone does really bad?
Yes.
I felt bad. There was an OChem exam. I just put a sad face on a question because I didn't know the answer at all. So I was just like, I'm sorry. I actually have no clue what you're asking.
You see that